Okay, let's begin then. Hi, everyone. Welcome to session 8 of ISTQB training CTFL. I hope all of you are well and healthy. Let's first of all go through what we did last week. So last week we continued test levels and we covered system testing. Now, if we go through all the test levels, we have covered so far component, integration, and system testing. And today we will cover the last section of test levels, which is acceptance testing. Right, so acceptance testing, first of all, let's go through the definition that what is acceptance testing. Acceptance testing, like system testing, focuses on the behavior of a whole system or product. So as the definition says, like system testing. So it's really important to understand that if the definition is the same and the behavior, the focus of on the behavior of a whole system is just like as system testing, then why do we even need acceptance testing, and what is the difference between system and acceptance testing? So let's go through those details. So acceptance testing determine whether or not a system satisfies the acceptance criteria. So in system testing, we do have acceptance criteria. The focus is more on the end-to-end functionality. But over here in acceptance testing, it's more around that the user requirements, are those met or not. So in system testing, we cover both functional and non-functional aspects. We do negative testing, we do database testing, all these kind of testings, etc. But in acceptance testing is mostly done by the end user or someone who is in the company but is representing the user who has actually asked for that requirement to build or that system to be built, and that person is doing the acceptance testing, and mostly only the positive scenarios are tested in acceptance testing. So the second point is assess the system's readiness for deployment and use by the customer end user. So basically, by this point, by the time we reach acceptance testing in the test levels, we have already gone through component integration and system testing, which means that system testing by this point is signed off, and hence acceptance testing is triggered. So this is testing where we check for the readiness for deployment, that the system is working as the acceptance criteria identified earlier, and now it's ready to move to production so that it can be used by the customers. The third point is finding defects is not an objective. So if we go through the objectives of all the previous test levels, component, integration, and system, we will see that finding defects is a major objective in all of them. But over here, it says that in acceptance testing, finding defect is not an objective. It's not goal of acceptance testing, because this is done at the end. And by this point, everyone is expecting that the system is working as expected. And actually, at this point, if there are any major defects identified, then that can be seen as a very high risk to the system, and maybe it will be reviewed that whether it's safe to deploy this to production or not. So finding defects is not an objective for acceptance testing. The last point over here is acceptance testing may also satisfy legal or regulatory requirements or standards. So this is the same as it was for the previous test levels as well. So whenever there is any legal or regulatory requirements, it has to be taken care of in all test levels in different forms. Okay, let's go to the next slide. When it comes to acceptance testing, there are different forms of acceptance testing, and these are the main ones which are included in ISTQB syllabus. So we will go through these forms of acceptance testing. The first one is user acceptance testing, which is also known as UAT. Then operational acceptance testing, also known as OAT. Then the third one is contractual and regulatory acceptance testing. And the last one is alpha and beta testing. So let's go through all of them one by one. The first one is UAT. So let's go through the definition. So these definitions I have taken from ISTQB glossary. So UAT is defined as a type of acceptance testing performed to determine if intended users accept the system. So over here, we are checking the system or the product from an end user perspective and evaluating if it's ready to be used, to be deployed or not. So if we see in UAT, what is the focus? So the focus of UAT is validating the fitness for use of the system, that if the system is ready for use or no. And the objective of UAT is building confidence that the users can use the system. And environment is real or simulated. Okay, so now in component and integration testing is done mainly on developer's machine, which we already went through. System testing is done on a test environment. When it comes to UAT, ideally, there should be a UAT environment. Sometimes it is done in test environment itself, but there can be clashes as well, because if we are doing UAT and in the same environment and at the same point, there are other new builds also being deployed for system testing, maybe of some other product, then there can be a clash. So ideally, there should be a UAT environment, which is also known as like staging environment or pre-pod environment. So there are many names, but yes, there should be ideally an isolated environment only for UAT, which should be a replica of production environment, so that we can make sure that whatever the testing has been done during UAT is mimicking the same behavior as of production. So it can be either on real or simulated. When it says real, means like that either it can be a replica of production environment, or it can be a virtual environment, or ideally it shouldn't be done on the production environment. It should be another environment which should be same as production. Right, so now let's say that when UAT happens. So UAT happens in the final phase of testing before we deploy to the production. And we already covered that there should be a separate environment for that. By this point, system testing is done, and most of the defects are also being fixed. So if there are any major defects still in the system, we shouldn't start UAT. We should wait for that. And then let's say that all the major and high bugs are, critical bugs are being fixed, then it's a good point to start UAT. Okay, let's go through two scenarios. I have identified two scenarios over here for UAT. So one scenario is that there is a company who has built a system for a client, and that company has built the system and they have done component integration and system testing at their end. So they have built the whole system. So before handing it over to client, they will perform all these three test levels and then hand it over to client with some release notes. And now over here at client end, client will go through the system and do acceptance testing, because this is the point where they will check that whatever the requirements they gave to that company, whether they built the system according to those requirements or not. And based on that, the acceptance testing will be carried out. And if all goes well, then it can be approved for usage. Otherwise, it will be the feedback will be given back to company if there are any issues or something is missed in the requirements which were being agreed earlier, etc. So this is one scenario where the user acceptance testing is done. In this case, the client is the user. Second scenario is where there is a product which is being built within a company from end to end. It's their own product. And after that, it's deployed to production for users. So users can use that product. So in this case, all these life cycles, so all these test levels will be done in that company: component, integration, system, and acceptance testing. The only change would be that in this case, the acceptance testing will be done by product owner or maybe by stakeholder. So someone who actually provided these requirements based on which that product or system was developed. So these are two scenarios. Sometimes UAT is done by the client, a third party, or it's done by someone from business, product owner, stakeholder, who is basically representing the end user. The second type of acceptance testing is operational acceptance testing, which is also known as OAT. If we go through the definition, it's a type of acceptance testing performed to determine if operations and or system administration staff can accept a system. Okay, so over here in operational acceptance testing, it's more kind of non-functional testing. So all the non-functional aspects of a system, when it comes to acceptance testing, then those come under OAT. So over here, the focus is more on operational aspects of the system. The objective is building confidence that the operators or system administrators can keep the system working properly for the users in the operational environment, even under exceptional or difficult conditions. So we will go through few scenarios later on. The environment, simulated production environment. So similarly, there should be an environment which is either close to the production environments, or maybe in few cases, few aspects of OAT can also be done in the production as well, depending on what kind of acceptance testing is done for operations. Okay, so let's go through few scenarios which are being covered in OAT. Sorry. Testing of backup and restore, installing, uninstalling, and upgrading, disaster recovery, user management, maintenance task, data load and migration task, checks for security, vulnerabilities, performance testing. So if we go through all these things, these are all part of non-functional testing. So what we are doing over here is we are covering performance testing. We are covering here security testing, any kind of maintenance testing, then disaster recovery. So what is disaster recovery? That if there is a problem at one site, then we can move the operation to some other site, and we can continue the operation as usual. Like the situation nowadays is the perfect example of disaster recovery. So most of the countries are under lockdown, which means that we can't go to our office and work there as usual, which means the company has some disaster recovery procedures in place, and that's why the companies have all the systems, procedures, processes in place, which allows the employees to work from home as well and continue the business. So this is coming under disaster recovery. Then there can be, as part of the system test, operational acceptance testing, maybe some installation of the software or uninstallation or upgrading may be required. Let's take an example of a mobile app. So whenever a mobile app is being built, then installation and upgrade of a new version of mobile, that's part of operational acceptance testing. Then whenever there are any key, so whenever there will be some data being stored in the databases, then there will be some backups taken as well, so that if we have to restore from those backups, then that's possible. So all that will be covered in OAT. The same is with data load and migration tasks. So let's say if we have to move the data from one database to another database, that will fall in this category. Or if we have to migrate the entire database schema to another environment, that will also be covered under OAT. So I hope that this part is clear as well. The third type is contractual and regulatory acceptance testing. So contractual acceptance testing is a type of acceptance testing performed to verify whether a system satisfies its contractual requirements. It's performed against a contract's acceptance criteria and performed by users or independent testers. Right, okay, so over here, let's say if there is any project, before that project started, there was a contract which was being signed between two companies, and there was some acceptance criteria which was specified, and based on that contract, the contractual acceptance testing will be done by either the end users or the people who actually asked for any software to be developed, or by independent testers, that maybe they can hire some testers which can do this acceptance testing. The same is for regulatory acceptance testing, a type of acceptance testing performed to verify whether a system satisfies its contractual requirements. So performed against any regulations must be adhered to, such as government, legal, or safety regulations, and it's done by users or independent testers. So it's basically the basic objective, the process is the same. It's just that in contractual, it's more based on the contract which was being signed between two companies, and in regulatory, if there is any standard, so it's done against that specific industry standard. So this brings us to the last type of acceptance testing, which is alpha and beta testing. So what is alpha testing? It is a type of acceptance testing performed in the developer's test environment by roles outside the development organization. When we say outside the development organization, over here, we are talking about the project team which developed that specific project. And this project team will be comprised of the developer, tester, business analyst, etc., all these people. So when we say the roles outside the development organization, we are talking about that team who was part of the development of that project. It's performed at the developing organization side, not by the development team, but by potential or existing customers or an independent test team. Okay, so this applies to those kind of projects where let's say that there is a product which is ready to launch, but before we launch that product, we have completed our system testing, and we just want to make sure that there are some end users, people who are like end users are testing that that application or software or system, who hasn't seen that application before, and they were not part of the development team, so they don't know, they haven't been part of that project beforehand. So maybe if it's done, it can be done within a company. So within a company, let's say that they can be a pool of people from different departments can be selected, and it can be testers as well, but not the same testers who tested that application. So that's why it says independent testing, which means the test, maybe there's a test team which were testing some other project, they can test that, or they can be tested by some other developers as well. So it can be a pool of some other developers, testers, some project managers, maybe someone from the support team, etc. So all these can be forming an alpha testing team, and they can test the system based on whatever the plan is, maybe for a week or 2 weeks, whatever the window has been set. So alpha testing basically ensures that system behaves as expected with a broader group of users. So it is performed after all functionality is developed, tested, and and most of the regression testing is also done and passed, and there are no major defects. So let's say that if alpha testing has gone well, then we can proceed to beta testing. So beta testing is a type of acceptance testing performed at an external site to the developer's test environments by roles outside the development organization. It's performed by potential or existing customers and or operators at their own location, may come after alpha testing, or may occur without any preceding alpha testing having occurred. Okay, so in this case, like the last point is saying that it can be occurring after alpha testing is successfully passed, or maybe in some cases, alpha testing can be just skipped and only beta testing is done. So let's say now we have successfully signed off alpha testing, and then beta testing has begun. In this case, it is exposed outside of the organization to people within the actual target market. It provides feedback from real customers in actual customer environments rather than our test environments. Because before that, everyone has been testing it within the environments which were set up within the organization. So now beta testing is done outside the organization by the actual users, and it can be an ongoing activity as well. So for example, if there is a new new application, a new mobile app which is being launched, so there can be different ways of doing beta testing. One way is that we don't launch it to, so let's say if we have 1,000 customers, we don't launch it to all 1,000 customers. We just roll it out maybe to only 1% of our customers, just to see if there are any adverse effects or if it's working properly. And while we roll it out to 1% of our customers, we'll keep on checking the logs and the tracking mechanisms just to see that there is no unexpected behavior. And then gradually we can increase the roll out to other to a higher percentage, like 5%, 10%, and then eventually 100%. So this is one way of doing beta testing. The other way is that sometimes we can, based on our product, so let's say there is a product which is a licensed product, and which might have a subscription, a monthly subscription, or maybe an annual subscription, and a company who is launching that product can ask for some volunteers for beta testing who will actually do the testing for them. They will start using that product before its actual release. And if there are any issues reported, then the company can fix that. And in return, they can offer the volunteers who are doing beta testing maybe a discount in their subscription level or any other kind of incentive, etc. So this is another way of doing beta testing. So let's go through the objective of alpha and beta testing. Building confidence among potential or existing customers that they can use the system under normal everyday conditions and in the operational environments to achieve their objectives with minimum difficulty, cost, and risk. So that's why we are doing alpha and beta testing, as we went through the details earlier, that it might be that a brand new system which we are launching. So that's why that will be potential customers, or maybe we have existing customers to our already being used product, and we have redesigned that product altogether, and we want to launch that product again to the existing customers. So we, instead of launching it to the all customers, we will just take a group, a pool of the customers, and we'll observe that if there are any adverse impacts on the functionality or usage or no. So this gives us a very good insight and confidence. The second one is detection of defects related to the conditions and environments in which the system will be used, especially when those conditions and environments are difficult to replicate by the development team. So over here in alpha and beta testing, especially in beta testing, the environments is not in the company's, not company's environment. It's outside, which means that if there are 10 users, they are using it in 10 different locations. So they have 10 different environments in which that system will be used. So it will give us a very good insight. And if there are any defects, then that can be detected and they can be fixed. And especially for those conditions where it's difficult to replicate by the development team. Like sometimes there are few defects which in a specific environment we either can't replicate or we can't test because of different situations. There might be some scenarios which might a tester would have identified that this would be good to test, but maybe because of some limitations or so any other factor that couldn't be tested. And then in beta testing, it can be ensured that we have that set of customers where we can test that target area which was not being tested earlier. So that this is one of the other objective of alpha and beta testing. So before we go through the objectives, all the attributes of the acceptance testing, is there any question so far from the types of acceptance testing? Okay, so there's no question. Okay, let's see. I think there is one. Okay, Gaurav is saying alpha and beta testing is crowd testing, right? Yes, Gaurav. So this will fall under crowdsource testing. So crowdsource testing is that there are many independent companies. If we hire them for doing any testing, then they have many testers who are spread all over the world. So they are based in different geographical locations, and then they can do the testing for us in different time zones, in different currencies, different environments, etc. So so that's so many companies use crowdsourced testing. So yeah, that's correct. Vineet is saying, I'm a little bit confused here. UAT done by tester or client? And for UAT, I think software is fully stable. One more, this what we will check in alpha and beta testing, how we will do both, what is the requirement of both. Okay, so first of all, Vineet, these are the types of acceptance testing, but we are not saying that in every case we have to perform all these kind of acceptance testing. It depends on the product which is being developed, and maybe in some cases we don't need alpha and beta testing, and in some cases we might need UAT, alpha and beta testing, and maybe ONT as well. So it depends on what's the requirement of the and what's the scale of acceptance testing. Okay, so first of all, let's go through your all the points one by one. So you are saying UAT is done by tester or client. Okay, so system testing is done by tester. When it moves to UAT, UAT is done as the name says, user acceptance testing. So it is done by client. So we went through two examples. One where a client is a third party who has asked another company to build their project. And once it's developed, then of course client will be the user and they will perform UAT to make sure that whatever they have asked is developed in the same way. So the client will be the user in this case. The other scenario which we went through is that there is one company, they are developing a product and someone from business is asking the team to develop that. Means that they have done the research in the market. They want one product to be developed, so they are basically representing the end user in this case, and ideally they should be doing UAT. In few cases I have seen that testers also do UAT, but it should be in conjunction to with the end user, like with the client or with the stakeholder or product owner, because otherwise there will be no difference between system testing and UAT. So anyone who is doing UAT can take help from the testers, because the testers have already performed system testing and they know the system very well. So if they have any question, especially in terms of any test data, then they can ask for help from testers. So I hope that UAT part is clear. And you mentioned UAT is fully stable. Yes, that's right. So there is no point of starting UAT until system testing is not complete or the system is not stable. So as we said, that system testing should complete, that should be a prereq. And secondly, there shouldn't be any major defects in the system. So the system should be stable before we start UAT. And then you asked about alpha and beta testing, that what we will check in alpha and beta testing. Okay, so now over here in alpha and beta testing, still we are testing it from end users perspective, but over here then people who are doing alpha and beta testing will be different. In this case, we are not saying that a product owner or a stakeholder will do alpha testing. They will not do, if they are being part of the same project, they will not do alpha testing. Alpha testing will be done by a group of people in that company, but not who are not part of that project. Or they can be done by another company, as Gaurav mentioned, maybe some crowdsourced testing. So we can hire some independent testers who do the testing for us. So maybe if there is a new application, a mobile application, we can ask different users who have different mobile sets, and they have different versions, and they can test in different environments and then come back with their feedback. And the same is with beta testing as well. So it can be it can be falling under crowdsourced testing as well. So there is no need of doing all kind of acceptance testing for one product or project. It all depends that whether there is a need of doing alpha and beta testing on top of UAT or instead of UAT, or most of the times UAT is sufficient as well. We can just do UAT and roll out our product to live. Okay, so I hope this is clear. That's good. So Gaurav, yes, you are right. Alpha and beta testing is crowdsourced testing. Okay, Vineet is asking, we did OAT in non-functional testing, that is in system testing, then why this comes under UAT? Okay, that's a very good question, Vineet. Okay, so that's true that when we are doing system testing, we are also checking the non-functional aspects as well. We are not only testing um, the functional aspects, but also the non-functional behavior of the system as well. The difference would be who is doing the system testing. Whether it's functional or non-functional, still it's performed by testers. System testing is done by testers. So the goal, the objective of system testing will be different than OAT. Because let's say if I'm a tester and I am no expert in security testing. Yes, I can check some security aspects as part of my functional and non-functional behaviors which were identified in the requirements. I can check that, or maybe one or two on top of my knowledge. Uh, Based on my experience, I can do some security testing, but the companies who are being hired for doing penetration testing, proper security testing, a system tester can't do that. That's why this has to be fallen under OAT, which means that it's taking care of all the operational aspects, making sure that the operation of a system is working as per the requirements, and there is no difference in it. The same is with disaster recovery, business continuity testing. A system tester can't do that testing. It is done by someone being involved from the operations team as well. They have to make sure that yes, all the disaster recovery procedures are in place. Yes, then a system tester can help in that case. That let's say if we have another environment for disaster recovery, that let's say if one environment is not working, and after disaster recovery, all the system, everything is being moved to another location. At that point, system tester can help the operation team to do some testing over there based on their test cases. But it is the objective of OAT is totally different. So I hope this is clear. And you also mentioned that why this come under UAT. No, it doesn't come under UAT. UAT is user acceptance testing. It comes under acceptance testing. So acceptance testing is an umbrella, and under that, then there is UAT, OAT, contractual or regulatory, and the last one is alpha and beta. Okay, that's good to know that it's clear. Okay, so next we will go through all the test attributes as we did for the previous test levels. So the first one is objectives. The first one is establishing confidence in the quality of the system as a whole, validating that the system is complete and will work as expected, verifying that functional and non-functional behavior of the system are as specified. Okay, if you go through these objectives and later on go back to the objectives of system testing, you will find that these three are exactly the same objectives in system testing as well. And this is what we covered earlier as well, that acceptance testing is similar to system testing. It's just that at the end goal, what is the end goal, the who is doing that testing is different. So system testing is more of like an end-to-end testing, while acceptance testing focus more on the end user's needs. Then we come to test basis, that what are the requirements and what inputs we need for acceptance testing. So we can have business processes, which can be our base for the requirements and based on which the acceptance testing can be performed. And or if there are no business processes, then maybe some user requirements, some user stories, business requirements. It depends what kind of project we are working on and which SDLC model we are using, how we are getting the requirements. So it can be in different ways. Same applies for regulations, legal contracts, and standards. So if there are any industry standards or if there are any kind of contracts, then yes, we do need them as they will be our base of requirements. And then user stories, as we covered, it can be either user stories or use cases. Then system requirements. If there is a system which is being developed, then yes, we do require some requirements for that system as well. Or if there is a product or a system, then we need some kind of like user documentation, like user manual, that manual for that product, etc. Then if that system needs any kind of installation, then we need all the procedures for that. Maybe that can be part of the user documentation, user manual as well. It can be part of that as well. Or if there are any risk analysis reports. So maybe in the beginning, when the planning was done, at that point, if there was analysis was done of risk, then that can be our based of requirement space as well, because when that can play a key factor in signing off the acceptance testing, because based on those risk analysis reports, we can, let's say if all the functionalities are not complete, then but all the high risk ones are done, then that can be a key point to make the decision that whether we are ready to go live or not. So that will be a major thing for acceptance testing. So now when we come to test basis of operational acceptance testing, that would be slightly different than the broader term acceptance testing. So before that, these test bases applies to all forms of acceptance testing. But there are few test bases which are exclusive to OAT only because of the nature of the testing. Like for example, if we are doing backup and restore procedures, we will require it only for OAT. We will not require it for any other form of testing. So if there are any, so if we are doing the test basis for OAT, then yes, if we are doing backups then or restores, we do need some procedures for that. We need to know that how frequently the backups would be taken, when it will be taken, will it be like every night, what time at night, etc. The same is what's the process of procedure for restore, who will be doing it, is it done manually by someone or will it be, is it automated, etc. The same is with disaster recovery procedures, that in case if there is any disaster, then what's the recovery procedure, who will initiate that procedure and how it will be implemented. Then the same non-functional requirements, it can be in a non-functional, of course, it's a very, very broader term. It can be performance, as it's mentioned, performance targets, or it can be load testing, it can be stress testing, it can be volume testing. There can be so many things which falls under non-functional requirements. Then there are operation documentation. So for, there can be any operational or maintenance documentation, some manuals. So that needs to be a basis for testing. Then comes deployment and installation instructions. So whenever there is a project which has been deployed under OAT, then it comes the deployment steps, that okay, when we are deploying it to a new environment or production environment, then how it will be deployed. So there needs to be some process for that as well. Performance targets. So if performance testing is required, then what's the acceptance criteria for that performance testing? What would be the targets which we are trying to achieve? So those needs to be identified. Then comes the database packages. So database packages is nothing else but the database itself. So for example, if we are using Microsoft SQL Server, that is a database. So basically that is a database package. So if we are doing any kind of data load migration or data migration or database migration, then of course we do need some database in order to do that. So that will fall under database packages. Then security standards or regulations. So if we are performing any kind of security testing, then there need to be any standard which we are adhering to, which we are comparing it against. So all these bases will be exclusive to OAT. Next is test objects. What are the objects on which we can perform acceptance testing? So just like system testing, we do need some test objects in order to perform acceptance testing as well. So this can be a system, which is also known as system under test. It's also abbreviated as SUT. So it's nothing else but a system which needs to be tested. Or maybe some system configuration or configuration data. So maybe in acceptance testing, all we have to do is we have to just test the configuration and not the functionality. It depends like what kind of project it is. If we just have to make sure that we are testing all the configuration data, that can be one of the object for acceptance testing. Then business processes for a fully integrated system. So maybe there are multiple systems which needs to be integrated, and for that we do need some business processes and which are actually required for a fully integrated system. So that will be required if we are performing acceptance testing. Then recovery systems and hot sites for business continuity and disaster recovery testing. So business continuity testing, which is also known as BC, and disaster recovery, DR. So we know this is known as like business continuity and disaster recovery testing, which means that in case there is a disaster, then how the recovery would be done and how the business will continue to operate. As I already gave the example of the current situation where yes, we are not able to work in our usual offices, but we are working from home, but still the business is continuing. So so this is what all the companies, they need to have some processes, because no one knew that we'll have the situation. So no one can predict that a disaster will happen. So every company, they need to have some business continuity and disaster recovery processes in place. Same is with operational and maintenance processes. So just like we spoke about business continuity and disaster recovery, those will also fall under operational and maintenance processes. But over here, a broader term is used that if there are any other operational and maintenance processes, then we need that as well to perform acceptance testing. Then comes forms and reports. So if there are any specific forms part of our systems, or if there are any reports, we have to perform acceptance testing on specific reports, then those are required as well. The last one is existing and converted production data. Okay, so if we are performing acceptance testing either on the existing production data or converted data. Converted data means that maybe sometimes in production data, we can't use that exactly for testing because of the sensitive information being stored. Maybe if there are any customer information in production data, then we can never use that data for any testing, either system testing or acceptance testing. So what we do, uh, most of the time, all the sensitive information from the production data is being encrypted and then being used for system testing or acceptance testing. And why we have to do, why that production data can be useful, because we are getting the data from the actual user. So maybe we are getting like different kind of scenarios which we might can't think of during system testing or acceptance testing. So that data is quite useful to use, but of course with all the sensitive information being encrypted. The next one is typical defects and failures. What kind of defects and failures can be found during acceptance testing? So at each test level, we have different kind of defects which we are expecting from that test level. So in this one, we are expecting system workflows do not meet business or user requirements. So acceptance testing is all about meeting the user requirements. So if there is any, and mostly it's like positive testing, which is being done in acceptance testing. So if the workflows are not meeting the user requirements, then that will be a potential defect. Next one is business rules are not implemented correctly. Business rules, maybe there are some logics which are applied for different scenarios. For example, if there is any discount being applied for different shopping amounts, then that will fall under business rules. Or if there is any loan application and there are some prereqs for that, which will be, then that will fall under business rules as well. So if the business rules are not applied as expected, then that will cause a defect. The third one is system does not satisfy contractual or regulatory requirements. So if there is a contract and at the end there is anything happening in the system which doesn't meet that contractual requirement or a regulatory requirement, then those kind of defects can be identified in acceptance testing as well. The last one is non-functional failures such as security vulnerabilities, inadequate performance efficiency under high loads, or improper operation on a supported platform. Okay, so this is more about security testing, performance testing, or any other operational aspect of the platform or the system which is being tested. So if there is anything which is not as expected, then we will be having a potential defect in that area as well. So here we are done with the defects and failures. Now we will come to approaches and responsibilities. So first of all, who is responsible for conducting acceptance testing? So acceptance testing can be done by a customer, like a real end user, or a business user, a product owner, or a stakeholder. So this is what we already covered. So I hope that this part is now clear, that who actually can perform acceptance testing. Next comes to the approaches for acceptance testing. So acceptance testing might, the way we approach acceptance testing might differ based on our SDLC model, which we are using. So we are comparing over here sequential model and iterative model. So in sequential model, acceptance testing is done as the last level because it's sequential, which we did like waterfall model. So in that, because system testing is also done at the end, so acceptance testing will be done as the last level before it is deployed to production. Then a next approach under sequential model is acceptance testing of COTS software. Okay, so this is the term which you will see a lot in the syllabus, and which is commercial off-the-shelf software or system. So which I will explain that what it is. Acceptance testing of COTS software product may occur when it is installed or integrated. So when we speak about COTS, this is commercial off-the-shelf system, And this can be any product which is already prepared, already ready to be used, and it can be just bought as an off-the-shelf product and can be used. For example, Microsoft Office. That's one of the example for this kind of software. So Microsoft Office is not developed for any specific customer. It is an off-the-shelf product which is being sold by Microsoft, and we as user, we buy the license and then we install it on our machines, and then maybe there is some configuration issue, or there might be some installation issue due to which Microsoft Office doesn't work on our machines. So when we are installing Microsoft Office and when we are using it, then actually we are the end users and we are doing the acceptance testing. And of course, if something is going wrong, then we have spent money on that, on the license, then we will go back to Microsoft and we will complain. We will maybe open a ticket with them that something is not working, etc. So in this case, we are the actual users for Microsoft Office. So similarly, there can be many other off-the-shelf products as well. The third one is acceptance testing of a new functional enhancement may occur before system testing. Okay, so let's say that in sequential model, there is a new system, a new product, and we are performing everything as per the sequential model. So we have done system testing, then we do acceptance testing, and then we release the product. And now the scenario we are talking over here is that there is some enhancement in that um, system. Maybe one new feature is being added. So they are saying in this case, acceptance testing of a new functional enhancement may occur before system testing. So before we start system testing, maybe at that point we first do acceptance testing, because the end user, whoever is doing the acceptance testing, knows that what they are expecting, and then they do the positive scenarios first, maybe 2 or 3 positive scenarios, just to make sure that the user requirements are being met. And then later on, we give it to system testers to perform system testing, who will perform detailed testing, and they will include all the negative scenarios as well as the positive ones. So this is one of the scenario where the acceptance testing of a new feature might be done before system testing. Then we have iterative model. In iterative model, acceptance testing is done during and at the end of each iteration. So in iterative model like Agile, what we have a user story, and each user story has an acceptance criteria, which means when we are testing, then we do have our acceptance criteria in mind. So during and in the end of each iteration, acceptance testing is taken care of. So it is basically throughout the iteration, we take care of acceptance testing. But at the end of iteration, let's say that if all the user stories are being signed off, and then we need someone to do acceptance testing on another environment, then yes, it can be at the end of iteration. The second point is, for iterative model, focus on verifying a new feature against its acceptance criteria, and those focused on validating that a new feature satisfies the user needs. So over here, we are talking about a user story, which we already covered, that in iterative model, we always have a user story, and the definition of done of a user story is that the acceptance criteria, which is the crucial part of that user story, is there, and it's being validated that that feature is satisfying the user requirements. So I hope this is clear as well. And with that acceptance testing, we come to the end of acceptance testing, and actually the end of test levels as well. Any question before we move to the practice question? Okay, there is a question. Okay, Gaurav is asking, what are key points to consider for risk analysis reports? Okay, Gaurav, so when we do risk analysis, so this is basically part of the planning where risk analysis is being done. So let's say, I can give you an example of, let's say that there are 10 features. And for those 10 features, we give them different risk priority. Like maybe this is very, very important. So this is 1, this is 2, this is 3. So this is again 1, this is 2. So there are different ways of evaluating risks, and each company, they do it in different ways. But let's say that there are 5 risk parameters, like 1 to 5. And from those 10 features, 4 of them are at risk 1, which means that these are very crucial. So risk analysis reports is being used by system testers as well. So let's say if we are doing system testing and we are short of time, and we have 100 test cases and we can't perform all the testing for all test cases, then we use this risk analysis report, and based on the identified risk, we start with the high risk features first. We test those features first so that we can ensure that even though there will be some risk that we are not able to finish or complete testing, but we can at least ensure that all the high risk areas were tested and were passed. So this is something which we can write in our test report. The same applies to acceptance testing as well. So when acceptance testing is done, then risk analysis reports is a very key metric, because then based on that, we can make sure that all the high risks or medium risks are being tested and those functionalities are working. So let's say again, if there are 10 features and during acceptance testing, whoever is doing the acceptance testing identifies that there is one feature which was not developed as per the requirement, or maybe it was miscommunicated and the developer developed it wrong, the tester developed it incorrectly, and maybe the requirement needs to be changed. Now there are two possibilities. First of all, if there is enough time, then yes, the requirement can be changed altogether if it's very, very high requirement. So let's say that that feature, if in the risk analysis reports is risk at number 1, then we don't have any other option. We have to make that change in the requirement, and it has to be developed again. It has to be tested again, and again, this acceptance testing needs to be signed off. But at the same point, if that feature is, let's say, at the bottom of the risk analysis reports, it's a very low risk, then in acceptance testing, we can make this decision that this is a very low risk feature and we can go live with this risk, and this can go in the backlog and it can be developed later. So that's why risk analysis reports plays a very vital role when making a decision for acceptance testing, that whether something can go live or not. Is there anything else? Gaurav is asking, please tell example of parameter types. Okay, Gaurav, can you explain a little bit more what kind of parameters you are referring to here? Okay, so parameters of risk analysis reports. Okay, so a risk analysis report, as I said, that there are different ways of calculating risks. So mostly it will be, if I take a very common risk analysis reports, then let's say there is one feature. So we will list that feature, and then we will list that what is the impact of that feature and what is the probability of that feature. That impact means that how that feature, let's say if that feature is not developed properly, then what will be the impact of not developing that feature correctly. Means like how many, let's say, users will be impacted. Will it be high, medium, low? So mostly that's what is, that's how we rate the risk in terms of impact. Then comes the probability, that the same feature, what is the probability of that feature being used in production? So for example, if that feature, maybe it has a high impact, but maybe there is a very small percentage of users who will be actually using that, which means it may be, one feature may be of high impact, but at the same point of low probability. So for every feature, we do calculate the impact and the probability, and then the product of that basically comes up with the figure of what's the overall risk. So what I will do that after this session, I will share you one of the major, there is a model which I don't remember the name of. I can share that, which is mostly used by the companies to evaluate the risks for each features which are part of those risk analysis reports. So I can share that in the group. But I hope that you got an overview of what is included in a risk analysis report. Okay, that's good. Yeah, sure. I will share it after the session. Right. Okay, so let's move on to our practice questions. The first one is, finding defect is not a major goal of acceptance testing. Is it true or false? Okay, Vineet is saying A, Jagriti A, Madhuri A, Denmark A, UV A, Jatin A, Sahana A. So all of them are saying the same one, A, which is true, and this is the correct answer. So in acceptance testing, finding defect is never a major goal of testing. So it's never one of the main objectives of acceptance testing. That's correct. Moving on to the second one. When acceptance tests are prepared in V-model. So if you just recall the V model, which is part of which we did earlier in the SDLC model, when do you think that in V model acceptance tests are prepared? So we are talking about when they are prepared. So go through these options and let me know, what do you think is the correct one? Okay, so we have got few responses. Let's see. Okay, Madhuri is saying B, and UV is saying A. Okay, B is as soon as testing begins. Then we have A as well, after system testing is done. So it's mostly A and B. And then Jatin, we have got a different answer, D, when user requirements are gathered. Okay, so Jatin, you are right. It's D. The correct answer is D. So just recall the V model. So when the user requirements are gathered, that's the point where acceptance tests are prepared as well. Let's go through the other options as well. A, after system testing is done. No, if system testing is done based on the requirements, and then the acceptance testing, we are talking about preparation and not like when acceptance testing is done. Yes, it will be executed after that, but the acceptance test can be prepared as soon as the user requirements are gathered. And the second one was as soon as testing begins. Yeah, that will be incorrect as well. I think there was some confusion with this thing, preparation and execution. So I hope this one is clear. Third, which of the following statement is not true? Okay, so we have started getting some answers. So just make sure we are talking about something which is not true. So Vineet is saying B, Jatin is saying C, Madhuri C, Sahana C, Denmark C, UVC, Vineet C. Okay, so everyone is saying C. Yeah, which is the correct answer. Yeah, absolutely correct. That's good. And the last one, acceptance testing can be done after system is installed. Is it true or false? Okay, everyone has answered A, which is true, and that's the correct answer. So acceptance testing can be done after system is installed, especially when we refer to the situation of the off-the-shelf, any commercial product which we are getting off the shelf. So first we install and then we do acceptance testing. So yeah, that is correct. And with that, we have come to the end of today's session. If there are any questions, please let me know. Okay, so no question from anyone. So I hope that you enjoyed today's session. After the session is over, I will upload the recording plus also the PDF of slides as well. And by tomorrow, I will also upload the questions for this session as well. So I hope you enjoyed today's session. And I'll talk to you then on Thursday. Till then, yeah, take care of yourself. Bye.